Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world.
And today we are initiating a deep dive into the architecture of the modern household. And I want to be really precise about our mission statement right off the bat here.
Yeah, let's set the ground rules.
Right. Because what we are doing is conducting a systems-level institutional analysis of the modern domestic ecosystem.
Which, that sounds incredibly weighty and honestly, maybe a little bit academic for anyone listening right now.
It does.
So let's unpack what that actually means for you, the listener, because the text we're analyzing today has a title that it might throw people off if they are expecting some kind of dry treatise on labor economics.
Or institutional design.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are looking at Find Your Unicorn Space, Reclaim Your Creative Life in a Too Busy World by Eve Rodsky.
Correct.
Whoa.
And because of that title and, the bright colors on the cover, which are quite cheerful, it is incredibly easy to miscategorize this source material.
Oh, totally.
So let's clarify right now what this deep dive is not. This is not a self-help review.
Right.
This is not lifestyle advice. And this is most certainly not a guide to finding a hobby.
Yeah, if you're here looking for tips on, I don't know, macrame or how to fit a yoga class into your Tuesday schedule, you might be in the wrong place.
Very much so.
We are looking at something much more fundamental. We aren't looking at what you do in your spare time. We're looking at why you don't have any spare time to begin with.
Yes.
And what that absence actually does to the human psyche.
Because the core thesis we're exploring today is that identity is an output of systems.
Identity is an output.
Yes.
Yes.
Who you are, or really who you are allowed to be, is determined by the design of the environment you inhabit.
Right.
And our analysis suggests that the modern domestic system is designed for extraction. And when a system is designed to extract labor and time without any replenishment, the inevitable output is the erosion of identity.
That is a heavy concept. Identity as a system output. It basically says to the listener, you aren't burnt out because you're just bad at time management. You're burnt out because the machine was built to burn you. It shifts the blame entirely off the individual and onto the architecture of the home and of society.
Precisely. And to really understand this machine, we have to understand our primary source, Eve Rodsky. Because it's crucial to position her correctly in this discussion.
She isn't just an author writing about feelings.
Not at all. She is an organizational management specialist. She's a lawyer. She has this whole background in consulting for foundations and major companies like J.P. Morgan.
Yeah.
She approaches the home not as this sentimental space where love conquers all. She looks at it as an organization that requires management rigor.
She's bringing the boardroom into the living room, essentially.
Yes.
She looks at the family unit and says, if a business ran like this, it would be bankrupt in a week.
Completely bankrupt.
Yeah.
And this isn't her first foray into this territory either.
Yeah.
Her previous work, Fair Play, is really the foundation for this whole discussion.
Right. Fair Play dealt with the division of labor, the mechanics of who does what. It introduced a system to make invisible work visible.
And fair. But Find Your Unicorn Space deals with the result of that division. So once you have reclaimed time, once you have established some baseline of fairness, what happens to that space?
What is the structural purpose of time that isn't just devoted to labor?
Exactly. So we have a really solid structural arc for this deep dive.
Yeah, let's map it out.
We're going to trace the design of this domestic system, look at the incentives that keep it running, analyze the predictable outcomes, which are things like burnout and erasure.
Right.
And then we'll look at persistence. Why does the system keep going even when it hurts the people inside it? And finally, we'll look at the interconnection between household labor and the broader economy.
Okay, let me jump right into phase one, the architecture of invisible labor.
Yes, the primary system.
When Rodsky looks at the modern household, particularly for women, she sees a system constrained by what she calls the 3 Ps.
The 3 Ps represent the roles that women's identities are currently designed to be contained within. Those roles are partner, parent, and professional.
Partner, parent, professional, that covers a lot of ground. I think for most people listening, that sounds like a pretty full, normal life. You have your spouse, your kids, and your job. So what is the actual issue there?
The issue isn't the roles themselves, it's the containment.
The containment.
Right. The design flaw here is the assumption that these 3 roles constitute the entirety of a valid existence. If you are fulfilling your duties as a partner, a parent, and a professional, whether that's paid work or unpaid caregiving, the system considers you complete.
Done. Fully actualized.
Yes, but there is no designated space in that architectural blueprint for the self outside of service to those roles.
It's like a building with only 3 rooms.
Right, exactly.
If you aren't in the kitchen being a parent, or in the bedroom being a partner, or in the home office being a professional, you're essentially standing outside in the rain.
You're homeless in your own life.
Right. There's no den for the self. There's no library for the individual soul.
And the maintenance of these 3 rooms requires an immense amount of what Rodsky identifies as invisible infrastructure. She references her should I do list.
I love this concept, the should I do list. And we really need to be clear here for everyone listening. This isn't just wash the dishes or take out the trash.
No, this is the cognitive load.
Right.
It is the unheralded data processing required to keep the family unit functioning. It's scheduling vaccinations. It's emotional management.
Oh, the emotional management is huge.
Just knowing that your middle child is anxious about the math test and needs a very specific kind of pep talk on Tuesday morning. It's remembering that Tuesday is crazy hat day at school and sourcing a hat on Monday night.
Yeah.
It's the tasks that possess a time component and a cognitive cost, but are largely unrecognized as labor by the other inhabitants of the system.
It's the difference between executing a task and managing a process. Like if I ask you to go buy milk, that is a task.
A simple task.
But noticing that the milk is low, knowing which brand everyone in the house drinks, remembering to put it on the list, and ensuring it is purchased before breakfast the next morning, that is management.
It is.
That is executive function.
And the system is designed so that this management layer is completely invisible. It just happens. The milk appears, the costume is ready, the appointment is made.
Magic.
Right? The other members of the household live in a magical reality where these things just occur. And this invisibility is a feature, not a bug, of the current design.
Wow. A feature, not a bug.
Yes. It allows the system to extract high-level management labor without paying for it or even acknowledging it.
At least until the system crashes.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the ultimate stress test of this design, the COVID-19 pandemic.
This is where we move from theory to hard data. The pandemic didn't break the system. It revealed exactly how the system was designed to fail.
Right. It acted as a pressure test that exposed every structural fissure in the domestic economy. And here is where it gets really interesting. And by interesting, I mean horrifying.
Truly horrifying.
Because we all lived through this, but seeing the actual data on it is a completely different experience.
Rodsky cites research showing that during the pandemic, women's unpaid labor, specifically childcare and housework, increased by 153%.
153%. That is an absurd amount of extra work.
It's staggering.
That's not a marginal increase. That is a doubling, and then some. That is an avalanche of invisible labor suddenly made very visible.
And look at the workforce impact. In December 2020 alone, all jobs lost in the U.S. economy were held by women. All of them.
All of them.
Over 3 million women dropped out of the workforce in 2020. This wasn't just a random occurrence. It was structural collapse. The safety net for the economy turned out to be the unpaid labor of women.
Rodsky paints this incredibly vivid picture of the kitchen table dynamic. You have dual-earner households, right? Both people have jobs. Both people are stuck at home. But when the lockdown hits, the man is often working at the kitchen table or in the dedicated home office, quote-unquote, untouched. The door is closed. He is at work.
And the woman.
She's working in the bathtub with a kid on her lap.
That image, the bathtub laptop station, is the defining symbol of this design failure. The system defaulted to protecting the man's professional time as untouchable, while the woman's professional time became permeable.
Permeable. That's the perfect word for it.
She was expected to simultaneously fulfill the parent and professional roles in the exact same physical space and time.
It's the assumption that a woman's attention is infinite and divisible, whereas a man's attention is finite and must be protected.
Precisely, and this leads us directly to the concept of time confetti versus untouchable time. This is a critical distinction in how time is experienced based on gender. It's not just about the amount of time. It is about the topology of time.
Time confetti. I feel like I live my entire life in confetti, but let's define it technically for the listener.
It is the difference between fragmented time and continuous time. Rodsky references a time diary study from the pandemic. It found that for a couple working at home, the average length of uninterrupted work time was 3 minutes and 24 seconds.
3 minutes? You can't even write a decent email in 3 minutes.
No.
You certainly can't code or design or think deeply about anything complex.
And while that average was low for everyone, the child interruption gap meant that mothers were interrupted significantly more often than fathers.
Right.
The system allocates time confetti to women, Little scraps of 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, punctuated by a demand for a snack, a lost charger, or refereeing a sibling squabble.
And you just cannot achieve flow in confetti.
Exactly. Flow requires sustained attention. It requires the brain to load a complex context, say the structure of a legal brief or the logic of a software program, and manipulate it.
Yeah, and that loading process takes time.
It takes a lot of time. If you are interrupted every 200 seconds, deep work or creative thought is structurally impossible. It's not that women couldn't be creative during the pandemic. It's that the temporal architecture required for creativity was demolished.
It's like trying to sleep but getting poked every 10 minutes. You might be in bed for 8 hours, but you aren't getting any rest. You might be at work for 8 hours, but you aren't getting any deep work done.
So we have a design that relies on invisible labor, confines identity strictly to service roles, and fragments time into useless confetti.
Which begs the question, why?
Right.
Why does the system function this way? Why do intelligent, modern couples default to this 1950s arrangement the second the pressure is on?
That moves us to phase 2, incentives, the economy of guilt and permission.
To understand the incentives, we really have to look at who feels entitled to time and who does not.
Okay, we have to talk about Mr. Untouchable.
Yes. This is an anecdote from the source material that genuinely made my jaw drop. Rodsky is on a plane.
Yes, she is seated next to a man. He is reading a book from the Harvard Business Review on work-life balance.
Which is a respectable text. He's obviously a guy who cares about optimization and being a good professional.
Indeed. Rodsky strikes up a conversation. She asks him about the book. He explains that the authors advocate for untouchable time, meaning, at a minimum, 1 full day a week that is yours and yours alone, untouched by work, untouched by family responsibilities.
Sounds like an absolute dream, but for most parents I know, that sounds like pure fantasy.
So Rodsky asks him if it's working. He says, to be honest, I already have a lot of free time.
And Rodsky naturally assumes he must be single.
Of course. Or maybe his kids are grown and out of the house.
But he is not single. He has a wife and 2 young kids.
2 young kids. So Rodsky asks the million-dollar question. She says, do you feel at all guilty or shameful about taking untouchable time to pursue your own interests outside of work and family life?
And this is the moment. This is the entire incentive structure laid bare for us to see. What does he say?
He laughs. He actually laughs out loud. And he says, my wife may give me shit for it, but no, I don't feel guilty.
No, I don't feel guilty. He's reading a book on boundaries, taking a full day off, leaving his wife with 2 young kids, and he feels entirely fine.
Perfectly fine.
He frames his wife's complaint as giving him shit, like it's a minor nuisance, not a valid structural grievance.
Contrast this with the internal state of women within the system. This discrepancy is the engine of the domestic economy. The system relies on women feeling something that Mr. Untouchable does not.
Rodsky brings in Brené Brown's research here to distinguish between guilt and shame, which I think is so important to unpack.
Yes, this is a vital distinction for understanding the enforcement mechanism of the system. Guilt is, I did something bad. It is a focus on behavior.
Right.
If I forget to pick up the dry cleaning, I feel guilt. I can apologize, pick it up tomorrow, and the feeling resolves.
Okay. And shame.
Shame is, I am bad. It is a focus on self. It is an identity-level indictment.
So when a woman takes time for herself, or even just tries to, the system doesn't just trigger guilt about missing a task, it triggers shame. It says, I am a bad mother, I am a bad partner.
Correct. The system uses shame as an enforcement mechanism to keep women in the giving role. If you step out of the service role, you aren't just being inefficient, you are morally suspect.
You are failing at the core cultural definition of what it means to be a quote-unquote good mother.
This connects directly to what Emily Nagoski calls human giver syndrome, or HGS. Rodsky draws heavily on this.
Let's define HGS for everyone.
HGS is the contagious false belief that one has a moral obligation to give every drop of their humanity, their time, their attention, their physical body to others. It divides the world into human givers and human beings.
And in this traditional domestic setup, the women are the givers and the men are the beings.
Exactly. The beings have a moral obligation to be, to explore, to conquer, to rest, to self-actualize. The givers have a moral obligation to give, to support the beings.
Wow.
The giver's entire purpose is to facilitate the being's journey.
Rodsky uses the metaphor of the giving tree to illustrate this. You know, the classic children's book where the tree gives the boy her apples, her branches, her trunk, until she's literally just a stump.
It is a ubiquitous text. We all read it as kids, and when you look at it through this system's lens, it's grotesque.
It really is. The tree destroys herself for the boy's whim. And the narrative frames this as noble. The tree is, quote unquote, happy to be a stump. Rodsky argues, quite forcefully, that it is not honorable for a tree to wilt and die.
No.
It is not honorable for a woman to become a stump.
But the moral hazard here is that society rewards the stump.
How so? Walk us through that reward system.
The incentive architecture gives you social capital for self-sacrifice. You are the good mother if you are exhausted. You are the devoted wife if you have no needs of your own. We praise the burnout.
You really do.
We look at the woman running on 4 hours of sleep who somehow baked organic cupcakes for the school bake sale, and we say, wow, she does it all. We validate her erasure.
We validate her erasure. That is a powerful phrase. And conversely, the system penalizes boundary setting.
Yes, if you say, no, I'm taking this time for myself, you are labeled selfish. You lose that social capital. You are seen as cold or neglectful.
So Mr. Untouchable gets to keep his identity because the system grants him permission by default. He doesn't need to ask for it. He assumes it.
Right.
Women have to fight through a solid wall of shame just to get 5 minutes to themselves.
And that leads us to phase 3, predictable outcomes. If you design a system based on human giver syndrome and run it on fragmented time, the specific inevitable output is systemic burnout and identity erosion.
Identity erosion. That's a key phrase here. It's not just being tired. Everyone gets tired. This is existential.
Yes, it is the loss of self. It is the condition where a person becomes unrecognizable to themselves outside of their service roles. You wake up one day and you realize you don't know what you like, what you want, or who you are when no one is actively asking you for something.
Your entire interface with the world becomes reactive.
Entirely reactive.
Rodsky talks about how we devalue creativity in this context. The language we use to describe a woman's interests is so telling. We call non-economic time a hobby.
Or a vanity project. Notice the highly gendered coding of that term. Vanity project implies pointlessness. It implies narcissism.
Yeah.
It suggests that doing something just for yourself is an act of pure vanity.
Guilty pleasure. That's another one we hear constantly.
Exactly. Framing joy as a moral transgression. I'm eating chocolate, it's a guilty pleasure. I'm watching a show, it's a guilty pleasure.
Why is pleasure guilty?
Because in the giver logic, any time not spent giving is time stolen from the family unit.
The system categorizes creative time for women as an optional extra. It is a nice to have that is only allowed after all other duties are complete.
But the duties are never complete. That's the trap.
The laundry is never done. There is always another meal to plan. There is always another permission slip to sign or email to answer.
The domestic loop is infinite. It is a literal Mobius strip of labor. Therefore, if creative time is conditional on the completion of domestic labor, creative time is theoretically impossible.
You are waiting for a finish line that doesn't exist.
And this has real physical and relational impacts. It's not just, oh, I'm sad I didn't get to paint today. It's, I am physically ill.
Let's get into that, the physical toll.
It's physiological.
What?
Rodsky discusses the toll of overgiving and the lack of restorative time. We see inflammation. We see a chronic stress response. The body keeps the score of this structural imbalance.
Right.
When you are in a state of constant vigilance managing that massive shoot-I-do list, your cortisol levels never reset. You are perpetually in fight or flight, even when you're just sitting on the couch.
And relationally, what happens to the partnership?
Resentment. You cannot have a healthy partnership when one person is preserving untouchable time and the other is drowning in time confetti.
No.
The resentment grows in the gap between those two experiences. It becomes a toxicity that seeps into every single interaction.
Rodsky points out this fascinating inversion regarding the midlife crisis that I want to touch on.
Yes. She critiques a Forbes article that listed pursuing passion as a sign of a midlife crisis, as if suddenly wanting to paint or write or dance or buy a motorcycle is a symptom of a mental breakdown.
And Rodsky just flips it completely. She says, no, not pursuing passion is the crisis.
Exactly. The crisis is the suppression. The midlife crisis is actually a crisis of perception, a sudden realization that the identity has been eroded to the point of a true emergency.
Right.
The quote-unquote crazy behavior, buying the motorcycle, writing the novel, is the identity gasping for air. It is the soul trying to break out of the 3Ps container before it suffocates entirely.
So we have a broken design, warped incentives, and terrible destructive outcomes. Why does it persist? This is phase 4. Why don't we just stop?
The system persists because of feedback loops and internalization.
Let's talk about the availability mandate.
This is the cultural expectation that women must always be reachable and interruptible. It creates a vicious feedback loop. Because women are expected to be available, they are interrupted. Because they are interrupted, they don't achieve flow.
Right.
Because they don't achieve flow, they don't produce creative work. Because they don't produce creative work, their time is seen as less valuable. And because their time is less valuable, they are interrupted.
It's a closed loop. And if you try to break it, boundaries are seen as aggression.
If you break the loop, if you literally lock the door to get 10 minutes of peace, it is perceived as a hostile act against the family unit. Why are you locking us out? Don't you love us?
The boundary is weaponized against the woman.
And then there's the internal side of things, internalized compliance. Even when you give women space, sometimes they don't feel comfortable taking it.
This is the I should be doing narrative. The conditioning runs so deep. You sit down to write and your brain immediately says the laundry is piling up. I should be researching summer camps. I should be meal prepping.
We police ourselves on behalf of the system. We have internalized the overseer.
Rodsky brings up an anecdote about Julianne Hough here that I found really illuminating regarding motivation.
Yes. This highlights the crucial difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Julianne Hough, she's incredibly successful, a dancer, singer, actress. From the outside, she looks like someone who has her unicorn space completely figured out, but she describes herself as a pusher.
She pushed for awards, for fame, for all the extrinsic goals.
And she hit a wall of total exhaustion. Because extrinsic motivation, doing it for the award, for the applause, for the system's approval, is inherently depleting. It is still a form of labor. You are working for the validation of others.
Rodsky contrasts this with the pull of unicorn space.
Unicorn space is intrinsic. You do it because it feeds you. Pursuing goals for social approval reinforces the system because you're still performing for an audience. Pursuing unicorn space disrupts the system because you are finally performing for yourself.
And she has a test for this, the deserted island test.
It's a simple but brutal diagnostic. I really want every listener to apply this to their hobbies right now.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you were on a deserted island and no one would ever see the result, no Instagram likes, no promotions, no good job from your partner, no monetary gain whatsoever, would you still do it?
That is tough. If the answer is yes, it's intrinsic. If the answer is no, it's just another job.
Correct. And the system persists because we are often tricked into chasing extrinsic goals that look like creativity but actually act like labor. We bake the perfect, elaborate cake, not because we love the chemistry of baking, but to be the good mother on Instagram.
Yeah.
That is not unicorn space. That is performance. That is just another room in the three-piece house.
So how do we break out? We've diagnosed the illness thoroughly here. What is the cure? This brings us to phase 5, interconnection and intervention. Rodsky actually offers tools to hack the system.
She offers design sixes. It is important to view her work as a suite of tools. Fair play is the micro-level design intervention.
That's the card system, right? The method to distribute the chores.
Yes. It explicitly distributes the invisible labor. Its primary function is to create the possibility of time. You cannot have unicorn space if you are drowning in laundry and cognitive load. Fair play clears the deck. It stops the bleeding.
And unicorn space is the structural reframing of what that recovered time is actually for.
Exactly. Once you have the time, you must defend it. And to defend it, you must define it. We need to define unicorn space very carefully.
Let's do it. What is it not?
It is not a hobby. It is not a distraction. And crucially, it is not self-care.
Wait, it's not self-care. I feel like self-care is the absolute buzzword of the century right now. Everyone is constantly talking about self-care routines.
Rodsky argues that getting a massage, taking a bath, or going for a run is maintenance. That is keeping the machine running.
Oh, yeah.
That is essential. You need to change the oil in the car, but it is not creative. You don't get self-expression from a mani-pedi. Self-care is recovering from the labor. Unicorn space is utilizing the recovered energy for expression.
That is a massive distinction. Self-care just gets you back to zero. Unicorn space actually takes you into the positive.
Exactly. So what is unicorn space? It is the active pursuit of self-expression, and it requires 3 things: value-based curiosity and purposeful sharing.
And why unicorn? Why that specific word?
Because, like the mythical creature, it doesn't exist until you give yourself permission to reclaim it. It is magical, but it is elusive. It requires active belief to manifest.
Rodsky gives us a whole new infrastructure to build this, the 3 C's of creativity.
Curiosity, connection, and completion.
Let's look at curiosity first.
This is moving your mindset from should to what if. Should is the language of the system. I should do the dishes. I should answer that email. What if is the language of identity.
What if I learned to weld? What if I wrote a play? What if I studied mushrooms?
Exactly. It is the spark of interest that has absolutely zero economic utility.
It's following the thread just to see where it goes. Okay, in connection.
This is key. You must share the output with the world. This validates the time as real. If you do it in secret, the system can swallow it back up.
Right. Yeah.
If you share it, if you connect with the community, it becomes a tangible fact. It forces the system to acknowledge your independent identity.
And completion. This one hits incredibly close to home for me.
The importance of finishing the cycle. Domestic labor is an open loop. The laundry is never done, the dishes are never done. It is Sisyphus constantly pushing the rock up the hill.
Always.
Unicorn space requires completion. You finish the painting, you bake the cake, you wrote the poem. It combats the psychological drain of the never-ending list by providing a closed loop of achievement. It gives the brain the dopamine hit of done.
So, as we near the end of our analysis, let's explicitly ask the question, what is the crisis in perception here?
The crisis is in how we perceive the exhausted mother or the unfulfilled partner.
We look at her and what do we actually see?
We see a personal failure. We think she needs to manage her time better, or she needs a better attitude. We perceive the suppression of creativity as a lack of discipline or a personality flaw. We think she is boring or lost.
But what is the reality underneath that surface interpretation?
The reality is that this is a structural design outcome of an economic system that relies entirely on unpaid, fragmented labor.
Right. We fail to see the incentive architecture.
Exactly. We think women choose to do the laundry and skip the art class. In reality, the system punishes boundary setting with intense shame and rewards self-erasure with the cultural label of good parent.
So the real crisis in perception is believing that creativity is just a luxury.
Yes. We perceive unicorn space as a perk for the privileged, a nice to have. When we apply systems analysis, we see that it isn't a luxury at all. It is essential mental health infrastructure. It is the only thing that prevents total identity erosion.
The crisis is believing that creativity is optional. It is not optional. It is the oxygen of the self.
And that brings us to the ultimate conclusion of our structural analysis. We have to reconnect this household system back to the bigger institutional picture. Labor economics, gender norms, productivity ideology.
Right, because unpaid labor directly supports the paid economy. The only reason Mr. Untouchable can work his demanding job and take his untouchable day off is because someone else is absorbing all the entropy of the household.
The entire economy runs on the fuel of that invisible infrastructure.
So to change the outcome, to actually stop the burnout, we have to change the input.
We must change the permission structure and the structural design of the division of labor. We have to stop treating the unicorn as a myth and start treating it as a mandate. We must recognize that a society that erases the identities of its caregivers is a society designed for extraction, not for flourishing.
Here is a thought to leave you with before we go. If the system is currently designed to make your creative life feel like a rebellion, what would it look like to build a life where your creative time is the very foundation the rest of the system rests upon?
That completely flips the paradigm.
Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.